November 19th, 2024. Larry Davis, a notorious gangster from New York, was found dead in his cell. No warning, no suspects. Just a shocking end that no one saw coming. Or did they? Here are some notorious gangsters who met the same fate, instantly killed behind bars.
Tonight, Haime Valdez, also known as rapper known as rapper Money Sign Suede, killed while being held at the State Correctional Training Facility in Soledad.
April 26th, 2023. Money Sign Suede, a rising star in the rap scene, where music captured the harsh realities of street life, was found dead in his prison cell. People just wanted to know what happened to Haime Valdez and what led him down the path of no return. Haime was an emerging rapper from California. Born to Mexican immigrants and raised in the Huntington Park area of LA, he starts recording and uploading his tracks by the age of 16. And then he was signed to Atlantic Records while still a teenager. His breakthrough track, Back to the Bag, was a rap scene hit in 2020. Now his lyrics were pretty raw, kinda reflecting his struggles with gang violence and his affiliation with street gangs in general in LA, striking a chord with his fans who lived through similar struggle. Haime wasn't only known for his music though. He did have some ties to the criminal underworld, connections to the Mexican mafia. These affiliations would also come with a heavy price. His gang ties created a constant echo of danger that would follow him everywhere, including prison. Now Haime was given 2 years and 8 months for being a felon, an addict, possessing, and owning a firearm. They put him at the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation from Riverside County. And to make matters worse, he's also facing a gun charge conviction from LA County. And as a matter of fact, he was serving what amounted to a 32-month sentence for 2 gun-related convictions that were running concurrently. So on the morning of April 26, 2023, Haime is found lifeless in his cell at the California Men's Correctional Facility in Soledad with a fatal stab wound. He was found in the shower area with his injuries consistent with homicide. They pronounced him dead at the prison's medical facility. The circumstances surrounding this are still unclear. Speculation says that it's been linked to gang affiliations, perhaps a revenge killing, or even a dispute with another inmate. This investigation is still ongoing, with authorities trying to piece together what led to such a brutal ending. The CDCR, California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, is handling the case, but so far, no suspects have been named, and the motives remain unclear. According to his attorney, Nicholas Rosenberg, Haime had been attacked before, really raising serious questions about the safety behind those bars.
And go down to the corner and make a right.
As I caught those two through the bathroom, one was coming up through I caught them through the wall in the bathroom.
November 19th, 2024. Adam Abdul Hakim, the popular and influential artist known as Larry Davis, was found dead at the New York City Correctional Facility. Some say his end was inevitable. Others believe it was long overdue. Davis grew up in Harlem's rough streets, where musical talent earned early praise. Some even called him 50 Cent before 50 Cent. But behind the beats would be a life steeped in crime. And by his 20s, Davis was neck-deep in the drug trade, with whispers of police protection trailing behind him. Now, it would be on November 19th, 1986, that Larry Davis cemented his place in American crime history. During a violent encounter with NYPD cops in South Bronx, he shot 6 of them and then vanished, becoming a fugitive and instant legend. When he was finally caught, Davis claimed self-defense and dropped a bombshell. He'd been working with corrupt cops, selling drugs for them, and they wanted him dead. His trial stunned the nation in a twist no one saw coming. A Bronx jury acquitted him of all charges related to the shootout, making him the only civilian in U.S. history cleared in the shooting of police officers. The NYPD and then Mayor Ed Koch were furious. Now, he would later be convicted for an unrelated murder, but many believe the system was never done with him. Fast forward to 2024. Davis, now 58, is found lifeless in his prison cell. No official cause has been confirmed. Rumors are saying inmate retaliation, orchestrated revenge, maybe even suicide. Whatever the case though, his death did raise eyebrows and reopened old wounds. To some, this guy was a cold-blooded criminal, but to others, he was a symbol of resistance against police corruption. In the end, Larry Davis's story didn't really end with a trial, but behind bars, in silence. It's July 21st, 2024. feared gang leader, Ezekiel Wicked Romo, had met a violent and brutal end inside Centinela State Prison, California. Romo was born back on August 28, 1950. In Panorama City, a neighborhood in LA's San Fernando Valley. Now, it was here that he'd built his criminal empire, rising to power as the ruthless leader of the Blythe Street Gang. Romo's criminal career would start early on. At just 18, this guy shot and killed a man at a fast food joint in the San Fernando Valley, and while serving time for manslaughter, he joined the Mexican mafia behind bars, quickly positioning his gang as a key player in the larger crime syndicate. When he finally hit the streets of Panorama City again, Romo didn't just take back control of his old gang, he made him sell drugs and pay taxes to the mafia, and anyone who dared step out of line, eliminated without hesitation. He returned with one mission in mind: clean house. He wanted to clean out his gang, get rid of old rivals, informants, and even his own members who didn't follow his rules. So as a ruthless and calculated leader, Romo had a reputation for his brutal violence. His rap sheet was packed with murder plots and attempted hits, and he wouldn't hesitate to take anybody out who got in his way, even his own people. That cold-blooded, no-mercy approach is exactly what earned him his nickname, Wicked. Romo had been serving life without the possibility of parole at Centinela. He was transferred back in August 23 after being convicted for a list of violent crimes. Now, he was linked to the deaths of at least 8 people, many of them killed at his direct order. However, the ambush that ended Romo's life was just as ruthless as it was calculated. The evening of July 21, 2024, at around 8 p.m., 3 inmates would launch a vicious attack inside the prison's day room. Armed with their shivs, they brutally stabbed Romo, showing no mercy, even as prison officers responded quickly, deploying pepper spray in some type of attempt to break this up. Oh, the attackers kept going. They were hell-bent on their mission, and by the time it ended, Romo's laid out on the cold floor. He's pronounced dead at 9:52 p.m. after being rushed to a medical facility. The 3 inmates behind this attack, Christian Moreno, Johnny Garcia, and Christian Hernandez, are now facing murder charges. No one knows the exact reason for the ambush, but all 3 guys come with their own long, violent histories. 31-year-old Moreno had been locked up since 2015 for assault and escape. 39-year-old Garcia had been serving time since 2009 for murder, attempted murder, and robbery. And 41-year-old Hernandez had already spent nearly 2 decades behind bars for first-degree murder, serving life since 2006. It goes to show us how deadly prison politics can be. Inside these walls, old beefs, gang rivalries, and power plays can explode without warning. Romo's reign came to an end in the most fitting way possible, at the hands of inmates inside the very prison he had once dominated. His legacy, built on ruthless control and bloody tactics, was abruptly cut short as prison politics and old scores finally caught up with him.
Tira o casaco. Isso.
É só tirar a roupa
Camisa
normal.
tirar normal, não tem esculacho. É geral, pô. Ninguém tá te fazendo nada, pô. Aí.
Sem esculacho.
In 2019, Cleavino Dilva, known as Bicino, meaning Shorty, one of Brazil's most infamous gang leaders, would make global headlines with a very amusing prison escape attempt. But while the world remembers his strange disguise and failed breakout, the way he died remains covered in mystery. Born in 1979, Cleavino Dilva was the notorious leader of the Red Command, one of Brazil's most powerful drug trafficking organizations. He had a reputation for running a tight, ruthless ship with operations in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro that are known for sheer scale and violence. And his name struck fear not into just his enemies, but also law enforcement. Cleavino was eventually arrested on the grounds of drug trafficking, and he was given 73 years and initially incarcerated at the Gadetino prison complex, officially known as the Bangu prison complex, located in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Now specifically, he was held at Bangu 3, one of the most secure units within the complex, which houses high-risk and high-ranking gang members. In 2019, even behind bars, his influence didn't diminish because he still had a firm grip on the Red Command, continuing to orchestrate drug operations. But Cleavino wasn't content with just pulling strings from his cell. He wanted out, and he came up with a courageous plan.
The convicted drug dealer who tried to escape prison by dressing as his teenage daughter has died. Prison officials in Brazil reported his death, saying that Silva appeared to have hanged himself in his cell.
On August 3, 2019, this man would try to escape in one of the most amusing ways imaginable. Disguised as his daughter, he wears a silicone mask, a wig, glasses, and even a tight pink t-shirt with cartoon donuts on it. He wanted to leave his daughter behind and walk out in her place during a routine family visit. However, that plan quickly fell apart. His nervous behavior raised suspicion, and guards stopped him before he could get too far. The ploy was uncovered, and this elaborate escape attempt failed. But this wouldn't be his first escape attempt. Way back in 2013, he was one of 31 prisoners who managed to break out of Vicente Piragbe Penal Institute through the jail sewer system. However, he was caught and brought back. Now, just 6 days later, on August 6, 2019, Cleavino was found dead in his cell at the Bangu 3 prison complex. Authorities reported that he'd himself with a bedsheet, which was tied to the window's bars. His death came shortly after his failed escape, and at a time of increasing violence within Brazil's overcrowded prison system, where gang clashes were becoming more frequent. Now, some did believe his death might have been a final escape attempt, while others speculated it was a message from his enemies. Regardless of the reason, though, it marked an end of an era for one of Brazil's most notorious gang leaders. On April 22, 2024, the notorious leader of Manchester's infamous Gooch Gang was found dead in his prison cell at HMP Oakwood. Was it a tragic end to a life steeped in violence, or could there be something darker behind his demise? Lee was better known as Cabo, and he was one of the most feared figures in Manchester's criminal underworld, alongside his childhood friend and partner in crime, Colin "Piggy" Joyce. Amos ran the Gooch Gang, a syndicate that brought terror to the streets of Manchester, earning the city the grim nickname Gunchester. Now, their reign of terror started pretty young. Teenagers caught up with petty crime that quickly would spiral into something much darker. And as their gang grew, so did the body count. The two gained a rep for being ruthless, almost psychopathic in their methods. One cop wouldn't mince words, calling them
psychopaths who shoot for fun.
Now, they had a tight grip on the streets. It would take years of relentless work from law enforcement to just chip away at their empire. Amos and Joyce weren't just gangsters. They became legends in the city's underworld, their names linked to fear and pure chaos. The gang quickly earned a reputation for extreme violence, drive-by shootings, drug trafficking, and cold-blooded enforcement who wouldn't think twice before pulling the trigger. Their crime stretched far and wide, and it turned out that their associates would flip on them, with investigators pulling in damning evidence from phones and other devices that police are now able to connect to a long list of horrific acts. The real turning point came in 2009, when 6 members of the gang testified against Amos and Joyce, leading to their convictions for murder, attempted murder, and firearm offenses. Amos got a 35-year sentence, while Joyce was given life. Now, Amos's involvement in gang violence became even more personal after the 2002 murder of his younger brother, Stephen Amos. Now, the tragedy only deepened his commitment to his own violent ways as he sought to exert control over his gang and solidify his power. His most infamous crime would have to be the drive-by shooting of Tyrone Gilbert in 2009, which did result in his conviction. Fast forward to April 22, 2024. Amos is found dead in his cell at HMP Oakwood. Authorities launch an investigation. At first, it looks like suicide, but the real cause seems unclear. Amos's death feels like the end of an era for the Gooch Gang. Some believe he really took his own life. Others think it's something more. Was it a personal vendetta or a violent end to a violent life? Now, his death sparked a fresh talk about how gang influence in Manchester is kind of fading. For many, Amos's passing was symbolic, like a chapter closing in the city's criminal history. But you know what? The case is still open. Investigators are looking into every angle, from revenge to a possible escape attempt gone wrong. Even though Amos is gone, his legacy and the fear he inspired still hangs heavily over Manchester's underworld.
Silverstein went to prison back in '78 for armed robbery. He was later found guilty of killing a prison guard and 2 inmates at a federal pen in Indiana.
In 1983, Thomas Silverstein earned a dark place in prison history when he brutally murdered a corrections officer at the U.S. Penitentiary Marion. With no death penalty in place, the system gave him something else. Could his sentence be the cause of his death? Or was it something else? Silverstein's life of violence began long before he ever stepped a foot in prison. This guy was a member of the Aryan Brotherhood, who'd gained a reputation for being extremely dangerous Now, as a young man, he was involved in a series of criminal activities, eventually leading up to his conviction for armed robbery and his transfer to the notorious Marion Federal Penitentiary. So while in prison, his violence would earn him the title of America's most notorious prisoner, particularly after killing correctional officer Merle Klutz in 1983 at the U.S. Marion, Illinois. His brutal acts against inmates, stabbings, assaults, and multiple murders while he was already serving a life sentence led him to be thrown into solitary confinement for the rest of his life, making him one of the longest-held prisoners in isolation in the U.S. Now, the decision to keep him in solitary for decades became kinda controversial. Prison authorities viewed this guy as too dangerous to interact with others, but then you have those human rights people that condemn the prolonged isolation as some kind of cruel and inhumane treatment towards killers. On Saturday, May 11th, 2019, turns out Thomas Silverstein's life came to a quiet end as he passed away at a Colorado hospital at the age of 67. Now, in fact, he'd been battling heart complications and had been hospitalized for several weeks before his death. Your initial reports are going to say that it was due to natural causes, but there are whispers that his violent past could have played a part in his death. You see, some wondered if this might have been retaliation from his enemies or somebody else who had gone to the hospital just to kill him. Maybe even a targeted attack by the prison system itself, especially after many years of living under harsh conditions. Now, despite his health problems and age, Silverstein's reputation for violence really made him a lot of enemies, both in and out of prison. At the time of his death, Silverstein had spent 36 years in solitary, the longest of any U.S. federal inmate, at the ADX Florence Supermax in Colorado, also known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. The death of Thomas Silverstein marked the end of a chapter in the dark history of American prisons. Inside the walls, Silverstein was both feared and respected. Now, for some, his passing was seen as a natural conclusion to a life spent in constant violence and isolation, but a lot of others saw the unforgiving nature of criminal justice and the lasting impact of a life spent in prison violence. July 6th, 2023 marked a dead end for Michael Mosca Torres, a man who lived a life of control, ambition, and violence, and died by it too. From the streets of San Fernando to the most powerful corridors of LA's jail system, this guy made a lot of enemies on his way up, and in the end, it looks like they caught up to him. Michael Torres, better known as The Fly or Mosca, met a violent end inside California State Prison, Sacramento. Born January 24, 1964 in San Fernando, California, Torres would climb the ranks of the Mexican Mafia with speed and brutality. Now, after serving 16 years for manslaughter, he was let out in the early 2000s and didn't waste time reclaiming his spot in the underworld. This guy ran drug trafficking, extortion rings, and various illegal dealings within LA County jails that he would eventually get the reputation as one of the most feared figures in the system. This guy was the man who had a tight grip on the LA County jail system, running his illicit operations from behind bars. But in a twist of fate, the very influence that made him powerful may have also sealed his fate. Now, Torres was originally tied to the San Fer gang, but became a member of the Mexican Mafia in 1994. Sponsored by Luis Yeto Buff Flores. Upon his release, he was appointed as a tax collector for the Mexican Mafia in the San Fernando Valley, which is an extremely powerful position. The role gave him oversight of drug profits and extortion payments across the whole area, reinforcing his nickname, Mosca. Now, one of the most infamous chapters of his criminal career came in 2003, when he confronted David Diablo Mendoza, suspecting him of falsely claiming Mafia affiliation. After confirming Mendoza's tattoos weren't legitimate, Torres shot him dead on the spot. That same year, one of his own crew members, Smokey, would be kidnapped and assaulted, reportedly on Torres' orders. Eventually, the law did catch up with him. Now, during his arrest, police found large sums of money hidden at his mom's home, along with an eclectic reading list, proof that there was more to Torres than just muscle. Despite only having a 5th grade education, he chose to represent himself in court. Now, many believe this was a calculated move to stay in jail longer so that he could continue running operations from the inside. Convicted of attempted murder and other charges, Torres gets a life sentence, something he may have seen more as an opportunity than a punishment, right? So from within prison, he's now solidified his status as a major player, using contraband cell phones to manage his finances, direct operations, and enforce the 1/3 tax on drug sales, a lucrative cut that funded the Mexican mafia. This man's control expanded beyond the prison, influencing street-level gangs and even laundering drug money through legitimate businesses. But power like his breeds enemies. In 2019, Torres was indicted for working with the Aryan Brotherhood to traffic heroin, proof that his alliances crossed gang boundaries and drew even more heat. His long list of enemies only grew. Then came July 6, 2023. Around 9 a.m., Torres is ambushed and stabbed by two inmates, Ray Cisco Martinez and Juan Angel Martinez, both of whom are serving life sentences for murder. Torres is pronounced dead by 10:30 a.m., and while the exact motive remains unclear, many suspect it was the result of internal politics, power struggle, or maybe even old vendettas.
For former New England mob boss Francis Cadillac Frank Salemi, the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday declined to hear Salemi's request for a new trial.
On November 4th, 2023, the man who once ruled Boston's underworld with violence and paranoia died alone, locked away in a federal facility. His death, too, marks the end of an era, as he was an old-school mafioso, flashy, feared, and full of secrets. And while he's gone, the mystery surrounding his life and the crimes he committed continues to cast a long shadow. Francis Cadillac Frank Salem, once one of the most feared mob bosses in New England, was born on August 18, 1933, in Boston, Massachusetts. Francis started off in petty crime but quickly built a name for himself in the city's underworld by joining the infamous Patriarcha crime family, where his ruthless ambition and taste for luxury earned him both power and his nickname, Cadillac Frank, a nod to his love for flashy cars. So by the 1960s and 70s, Cadillac Frank here is deeply involved in racketeering, loan sharking, extortion, you name it. He rose to become a key player in Boston's organized crime scene and eventually takes control of the Patriarcha family in the early 90s. But like many mobsters of that era, Cadillac's empire wasn't built to last. You see, Frank's downfall really began in 1993 with the murder of nightclub owner Stefan DeSaro. DeSaro had secretly become a Fed informant, and that made him a liability. Cadillac Frank, along with his associates, allegedly took care of to keep him quiet. DeSaro's body, though, wouldn't be found until years later, and the killing would eventually lead to Cadillac Frank's undoing. Now, by the mid-90s, Frank was convicted of racketeering and sent to prison. But even behind bars, he would still sway the criminal world. And then, in a stunning twist, he flips. In 1999, this guy testifies against several of his old allies, including notorious Boston mobster James Whitey Bulgar, offering up insider information that helped bring him down. Now, this made him a marked man, which earned him a spot in witness protection. Despite his cooperation, the Cadillac couldn't outdrive his past. In 2016, he's arrested yet again, this time for his role in DeSaro's murder. Now, even though he didn't physically kill DeSaro, prosecutors said that he helped cover it up and dispose the body. In 2018, he was convicted and given life in prison. He tried to appeal the ruling, but the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear anything. Cadillac Frank spent his final years incarcerated at the Federal Medical Center in Devens, Massachusetts. On December 13, 2022, he died at the age of 88. Now, officials believe this was from natural causes, but some might even say it's revenge, or even a quiet hit, considering how many enemies he made over the years. Still, no foul play was officially confirmed.
The notorious Boston crime boss James Whitey Bulgar is dead, one day after being transferred to a federal prison in West Virginia.
In October 2018, a notorious gang leader, once locked up in a Florida jail for his many crimes, was transferred to the infamous Hazleton Penitentiary in West Virginia. Little did he know the transfer would be the moment that sealed his fate and changed the course of his life forever. James Whitey Bulgar, whom we just mentioned, the notorious Irish-American gangster, was the feared head of the Winter Hill Gang in Boston. This guy's ruthless control over Boston made him very infamous. Now, his twisted connection with the FBI, an informant orchestrating countless crimes while feeding the feds information about rival criminals, kinda gave him an edge for years, keeping him one step ahead of the law. But you know what? His story's far darker than that. Born September 3rd, 1929, in Boston, Bulgar grows up in the tough neighborhoods of South Boston, and from petty crimes like stealing cars to violent bank robberies, Bulgar rose through the ranks of the Irish-American street gang, the Shamrocks, and by his early 20s, he's already already a criminal mastermind. Now, Bulgar wasn't just some local thug. This guy was rumored to be involved in smuggling weapons to the Irish Republican Army, and wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. His crimes included strangling 2 women and torturing a man for hours before finishing him off with a machine gun. But the most chilling part of his empire wouldn't be his bloodlust. It'd be his partnership with the feds. Bulgar had a rogue FBI agent, John Connolly Jr., in his pocket, turning him into an informant while still carrying out his own violent crimes. That dangerous alliance allowed him to stay free for years, even getting tips that helped him avoid indictments. Bulgar's run from justice takes him on this path from prison to the streets, and after being convicted for armed robbery and hijacking, he's sent off to Alcatraz. But did this stop him? No. In a bold move, he manages to escape and live on the run for 16 years, hiding in plain sight in California with his girlfriend, Catherine Grieg. They lived pretty quietly, but in 2011, the FBI catches up with him in Santa Monica. In 2013, he's convicted of 11 murders and given 2 life terms. Then, in the early hours of October 30th, 2018, the unthinkable happened. Bulgar was found dead in his cell at the U.S. Penitentiary Hazleton. He had just been transferred there the day before. A brutal life, filled with bloodshed, betrayal, and violence, had come to a fittingly brutal end. Bulgar was beaten to death with a padlock stuffed inside a sock, a method known as a sock and lock. The killers? Fatios Freddy Gaius, a former mafia hitman, and Paul J. DeColagero. It was clear that Bulgar's violent past had finally caught up with him. But you know what? Perhaps the most haunting part of his story is that near the end of his life, he seemed to reflect on it all. In a 2015 letter, he tells a group of students working on a history project,
"My life was wasted and spent foolishly."
Has to be the words of a man who, after decades of inflicting pain, realized the true cost of his empire of bloodshed.
Interesting. I can live with that.
March 5th, 2006, a man with a kill count rumored to top 200 suddenly drops dead just before testifying against the mob. Some called him a devil in human skin with a smile as cold as the freezers he stored bodies in. And when death finally came a-knockin', it felt less like justice and more like karma, long overdue. Richard Kaklinsky, aka the Iceman, was born April 11th, 1935 in Jersey City, New Jersey. Richard's early years were straight out of your worst nightmare. Violence, beatings, trauma. He blamed all his darkness on that upbringing, and by his teens, he was already committing petty crimes. But this pettiness wouldn't last long. Kaklinsky wasn't your typical mob hitman. This guy was a 6'5", 270-pound monster with a calm voice and a creative flair for murder. He claimed over 200 hits. Some for money, others just because. He worked with crime families like the Gambinos and the De Cavalcantes, earning him the nickname the Iceman after he would freeze his victims to mess with the time of death estimates. Cold in more ways than one. Whatever you believe, man. Whether the body count was 5 or 200, one thing is for sure. Kaklinsky left behind a legacy drenched in fear, mystery, and a trail of corpses that might never be fully uncovered. And some say that by the time he got to prison, he finally got a taste of his own medicine. Now, by the 50s and 60s, he was deep in organized crime, loan sharking, drug trafficking, extortion, and murder would always be his favorite. So while he's out here poisoning and dismembering people, back home he's playing the role of a loving husband and father of 3. He married Barbara Pedrici in 1961, and to neighbors, he just looked like the regular suburban dad. Imagine grilling burgers on the weekend after a hit job the night before. He kept this double life going on for decades until 1986. That's when Operation Iceman finally caught him. A federal agent posed as a fellow hitman and earned Kaklinsky's trust. Eventually, the Iceman bragged and talked a little too freely, making the feds pounce on him. He was convicted of 5 murders, given 2 life sentences, and locked away for good. But did prison shut him up? No, from behind bars. Kaklinsky gave chilling interviews, casually describing how he'd kill people, like he was ordering lunch. But not everybody bought it. Was he really the ultimate assassin, or just a master manipulator spinning his own legend? Fast forward to 2005. Kaklinsky was now 70 and suffering from multiple health issues, including Kawasaki disease. He made one thing clear. He wanted to be revived if anything happened. But his ex-wife Barbara signed a do not resuscitate order, and when doctors checked with her a week before his death, She stood by it. Some say that decision killed him right there. What's even more eerie, Kaklinsky died right before he was scheduled to testify against a well-known crime family doctor, someone allegedly tied to murders. Suddenly, he gets sick, and then suddenly, he's gone. No autopsy, no second opinion. Coincidence? Or did somebody just make sure the Iceman stayed silent?